you for having me back. It's been a long time. I thought I was excommunicated or banned. I was blacklisted.
Well, that's what typically happens when people annoy me. I just blacklist them. But Chris, do you enjoy bubblegum?
Yes, I do.
What's your favorite type of bubblegum?
Double bubble, I guess.
Double bubblegum? Dude, I was at the McAllen's escape room, right? And I'm walking out, and the building looks pretty cool. And while I'm walking out, I see this historical marker, right? And I've lived in McAllen practically my entire life. And I read this plaque, and it's about Andy Perez, who basically dominated the bubblegum industry back in the early 1900s. And I'm like, I never heard of this guy. Why aren't people talking about him? So I reached out, and I found his son, John Perez. How are you doing, John?
Great.
And the other thing is I also was fortunate enough to come across the documentary that his son created.
The one that's on Amazon Prime, right?
Oh, yeah. It's streaming on Amazon Prime. It is called, you know what? I'm not going to mention the name. John, can you tell us what the name of this awesome documentary is?
Andy Paris, Bubblegum King.
But the Bubblegum King. And in watching it, you realize why this guy was like the Bubblegum King, because he dominated the industry so much that he was a king, right?
That's right. The term the Bubblegum King was he was dubbed Bubblegum King by Life magazine. So Life magazine had been investigating him because of all the sales that he was doing out of McAllen. He started in a small building there on South Main Street. Okay, it was 121 and a half. It was basically where he ran AJ Paris import sales out of. This is before the actual factory was created. And they came down and started taking pictures of him in his office there. And then they went into Mexico, where the bubblegum was being produced in these little chicleras, and that it was in Monterrey, Mexico. And they took all those pictures. Then they later down the line, I guess 2-3 months, it came out in February 1st of 1947. He had a full-page picture in Life magazine. They called him the Bubblegum King, and that's when all that began.
So what made you want to create this documentary?
Well, I mean, the story was basically just about lost. All the artifacts, everything were, locked up in a closet. It happened before the advent of television, so this was all going on. Radio was still king as far as entertainment goes. That and watching a movie. People would go down the street to a movie theater in 1947 when this Life magazine came out to watch the news. And in fact, 3 weeks after the Life magazine came out, there was a Universal newsreel that came out with him. Once again, they called him the Bubblegum King, referencing that Life thing. And so they begin to pound that into the public. And then, the newspapers got a look at this guy who looked like a movie star, and they ran with him. He was front page news wherever he went after that.
And the documentary, you pretty much did almost everything. I mean, you were director, producer, writer, musician. I mean, that's what you do is music, right?
Yeah, it's my main thing. I mean, I came into it mainly wanting to, produce it, and of course write, because I'm the one who has the best understanding of the story. And of course there was stuff that was discovered along the way, which was fascinating. And I've been a musician since I was, very young, since I was a teenager. So I wanted to, score the doc. So I did.
And I guess, so your motive to produce the documentary was just because you wanted to, tell a story of your dad, or tell a story of the Bubblegum King, or what was the interest? I mean, it is your father, so obviously you have that passion.
Yeah, to solidify his legacy, okay? Because it was forgotten about, but it was very important. It was an extraordinarily important thing. It was something that happened very quickly. The business lasted only 8 years, but in that time and the things that went on were just crazy because this is just post World War II. So the country had been a little depressed. There were still sugar problems. There were still latex problems. Latex is a key ingredient in making bubble gum, okay? And the latex had been scooped up by the war effort for infantry shoes, tires, you name it, anything that was rubber, it went to the military. So kids didn't have bubble gum. Kids didn't have a lot of things. They didn't have bike tires. People didn't have tires for the cars. So when bubble gum came out, the kids went nuts for it. I mean, it was a big thing. It's hard to illustrate it vocally unless you really show some of the pictures, which I do in my doc, where it shows them just, they're going crazy. That's not staged. They're screaming for it.
Yeah, it's crazy. You know, he had bubble contest, blowing up the biggest bubble. Your dad, I seem like he was also a very good marketer.
Oh, the best salesman in the world, the best, the best that I've ever seen, that I've met till this day. There's nobody who could been a better salesperson for that product than himself. Yeah.
Now, your dad wasn't from the Valley originally, right?
That's right. He was born in Stockton, California. Later, the family moved for a brief time to Cincinnati, but for the main run, he was growing up in Detroit, Michigan. He grew up. His family were comprised of Greek immigrants. He was the first generation Greek. So they had a tobacconist shop, which sold candies, sweets. They sold some apples, oranges, peanuts, and cigarettes. And he helped the business at an early age, and then he sold newspapers for a while. So and he watched his parents struggle, as immigrants, and I think that's why he got along so well with the Latin Americans here in the valleys. He was very empathetic.
And he learned Spanish.
He did. He learned Spanish when he was in school, just for because he grew up being bilingual because they spoke Greek in the house. So Greek and English, and he just decided, I'll learn Spanish, for kicks, but it ended up paying off. As illustrated in the documentary, where the war came in and there was no sugar, man, and the family depended on having sugar, and he took a train all the way down to Mexico City and bounced around and found some sweet stuff to sell and brought it back.
Now, what struck me with the documentary and your dad's story was, you see the bubblegum factory, the historical marker. Mm-hmm. And you're thinking to yourself, it's not around anymore. So this is a rags to riches, and then riches back to humble beginnings, right?
Exactly correct. Yes, sir.
And
that's exactly right.
So what made your dad successful? What do you think helped him succeed?
Definitely, without a doubt, the key ingredient to this whole story is being able to speak Spanish. That was it. Without being able to speak Spanish, he never would have gone down to Mexico and made the deal for the latex. Nobody could find latex post-World War II. They were literally killing for latex. I know that's mentioned in the documentary. He went down there, and within 48 hours, he had cornered the latex market for the entire Western Hemisphere, which is like the most grandiose sales or entrepreneurial move I've ever seen. I mean, it's incredible, and he couldn't have done it without speaking the language, treating them as his equal, rather than some wild person. I don't think that I think there was a lot of industrious people here in the United States. They didn't know to take Mexico seriously. I don't think that they had the wherewithal either. He had a lot of charisma.
Yeah. Now, your father was doing this post Mexican Revolution, a lot of bad feelings towards Mexico and U.S.
Yeah, it's all after
Relations.
that. Yeah. But, when he would go down there, it was still wild territory, especially when he had to pay for his supplies down there and pay his employees. The part about taking a pistolero.
The pistolero, yeah.
Yeah, had to go down there because they don't know aceptamos cheques. It's all cash. It's all cash. He had to take those. That's crazy, man.
So, John, what do you think of when you're living down here and you hear like other people say, we need to speak English, only English?
You're an asshole if you're saying stuff like that. Okay. I used to hear that kind of stuff too. I'm sorry. Speaking Spanish is money. Okay. And it's what you need to be doing down here. Even if you're an Anglo, you want to be a big business guy and live in the Valley, you better learn how to speak Spanish, or else, this speak English stuff is nonsense. Go down there, be a man, learn another language, open up your mind, because that's old hat. That is very old hat. I used to hear they used to discourage that stuff in school when I was a kid, and that was ridiculous. I think it's a lot of strength, and it's strength in numbers. It's strength in being able to go to another country that's just sitting up against you. Like, speak their language. What's wrong with you? That's what
I think, and it's something where it's also adapt to the situations. In the sense of, say, I were to go to Greece. I don't speak Greek, but hey, I'm gonna learn it. There's opportunities here. You need to look for them. And so, I know when I graduated from law school, I didn't speak any Spanish, very little. But like you said, I live in the Valley. There's opportunities here, and I speak Spanish now because my clients speak Spanish. And like you said, it's old hat. It's something where you got to adapt to situations that are there. Your dad adapted by taking a train to Mexico City to keep your grandparents' business going.
That's right. He did. He was like an overachiever. He was like second in his class. He wasn't the valedictorian. I forget what they call it, the second. But he graduated with honors and had a scholarship to Wayne State University. And he went for a little while, but it wasn't for him. Isn't that amazing? And people are like, college. This wasn't for this guy. Multimillionaire, like superstar.
And I know, I guess in the documentary it comes a lot more clear, but like Ef'n said, a rags to riches and back to a humble life. So you grew up in a humble home.
I think semi-humble, but I've seen pictures of their home in later years where it was pretty nice looking. I think that the family did pretty well in that tobacconist
Chris,
business.
Why are you being so bashful? Just ask him what you really want to ask him. Okay, just ask him what you must have grown. What Chris really wants to ask you, John, is your dad dated Marilyn Monroe.
Oh, he did.
Other actresses.
Oh, yeah.
Have you personally, because of that clout, ever dated any famous actresses?
I haven't. I have not.
Oh, man.
But as far as Marilyn Monroe goes, oh yeah, sure, he dated her, and of course the one that introduced him to Marilyn Monroe was Natalie Wood, of course, when he was technical advisor on the bubblegum blowing scene from Miracle on 34th Street, the Christmas movie. Her saying like, well, you're too old to be my boyfriend. I love you, Mr. Paris. Here's my friend Marilyn Monroe, and she was just a starlet at the time. She hadn't made any big films. And then he dated other starlets. Nobody really terribly big, but a lot of other ones there in Hollywood when he went and hobnobbed with everybody over there.
It must be so cool to like drop that at like random cocktail parties where everyone's trying to impress like other people.
Oh yeah, that pretty much just takes the air out of the room, and the attention goes to me.
Yeah, my dad dated Marilyn Monroe.
It's like all of a sudden it's like hush. Let's listen to this man.
You can't top that.
No,
You just can't top that.
It's the ace.
It isn't it? Yeah, it is an ace. It is. I guess they went out just for a short time. But the other thing, though, is like he had the Mexican Marilyn Monroe, Amelia
Yes.
Hughes.
Ah, that's
Yes.
right.
The
yeah.
Mexican movie star who starred with Pedro Infante. So he has the
Learn
American,
Spanish, kids. Learn Spanish.
and he had the American, the real Marilyn, and the Mexican Marilyn Monroe. Now that was a serious relationship.
I love when in the documentary it's like, I guess I don't know if it was your mom, but it says he got in the car and took off because she was in San Antonio. It was like, I gotta go, guys.
Yep.
The girl's here.
Yep.
I'll see you around.
That's right. He did. He dropped everything for her.
He got in his convertible and took off. When you were a kid, did you know he was, I guess, the bubblegum king, or did he tell you, or how did you find out? I mean, for me, it's kind of like, if now you're like, I should have asked him this question. I should have asked him this. I should have found out a bit about his dating soap opera girls.
Yeah.
Did he tell you these stories, or eventually, how did it come out to you?
Yeah, well, there was like little indicators. It's a complex story. It's not something for a kid. I was watching a boxing match with my uncle and my dad. It was just like in early 70s, and this is when we had some sort of closed circuit television in town where you could order this line and you could get it, and it was Frazier and Muhammad Ali and Joe Frazier, and somebody made some comment on TV. I think they may have been talking about Joe Louis, who was a star back in the late 40s during my dad's heyday, and my uncle said like, "Oh, that's back when your daddy was the bubblegum king," and I was like, "What the hell is this?" It's like, "Dad, what's the bubblegum king? What's that about?" "No, I can't talk to you about it, son.
Oh, wow.
I can't talk to you about it now." Okay, and that was the end of that. End of discussion, nothing, One day, I came home with a Charms blow pop in my hand.
That was his idea.
And he was like, "I made those, and I made them first, son." It was like, "You did? What do you mean, with your vending business?" It's like, no. What do you mean? No, we won't talk about it now, but I made those first. I invented those.
And just for people that are listening, he got a lollipop with the gum. It's just that the formula had melted.
Right. His formula seemed to hold up and whatever, but it failed. It was a mass failure. And I still think there was industrial espionage of some sort. I still think that the thing was good, but when he went to go send it out in mass, I think someone sabotaged it. I think so. My mom said that she thought so.
Also. But anyways,
Yeah.
so you were saying how did you finally find out the story of your dad, the bubblegum king? When did it finally come out?
When I finally there was a weekend where I was sick with the flu, and I'd been out. It was pretty bad. I'd been out for a few days from school. It's unlike me, but my mom said, and I was 12, so mom said, "I want to show you some things, okay, about your dad." I was like, "Okay." It was kind of some mysterious stuff, and she pulls out these two boxes, and there were these huge scrapbooks, and there was all of these newspaper clippings of my dad being the bubblegum king, and like front page picture, and I was like, my dad was famous. And then she pulled out a 16 millimeter reel of film, and she went down to the library and rented a 16 millimeter projector, and then started showing me the opening of his plant and everything. And I was just like, I was blown away.
It was like alien to you because you'd never really thought about it.
That's
or heard
right.
Of it.
I was, so when I was 12 and I was able to really grasp everything, well, she told me everything. I said, "What happened? What happened?" "Well, she said it all," and she didn't really talk too much about the IRS, but she said it all happened too fast. She said it all happened too quickly for him to get a real grasp on how to make it last. It was crazy. She said, "I've never seen anything like it."
What's the difference between chewing gum and bubble gum?
You try to blow a bubble with a regular piece of bubble gum, and nothing happens because they used chicle, which is not a rubbery substance, and doesn't have any of those rubbery resins in it. Bubble gum, of course, now it's not made this way now, but at that time, the key ingredient, of course, was latex, and latex is a key ingredient to making rubber. And So it's it has that elasticity in it, so you can blow the bubbles.
Okay.
Eventually, they synthesized all that, and they took the latex out of the equation. There was nothing wrong with it. It was safe for human consumption. There was no problem with it.
Do you think that because your dad had this presence to go against the big time corporations, that played a role in the IRS like trying to target him?
Yeah, we could never really get a real fix because there could have been a lot of things. There could have been many things, and that took him down. Obviously, my father passed away before we started this documentary, which a lot of this information died with him. But there were still some people living. I mean, there's scorned a Greek ex girlfriend, who was a family with some means. Okay, could have been them. Could have been. He even had a brother-in-law who was on the board that really nobody liked too much. Who had ties to he had ties to. He had ties to Richard Nixon, who was a president later on in later years, but he had a lot of political ties that weren't too friendly, and this is where we get into an area where I think the IRS thought there was a secret business, going on, and there was never any way to. There was no proof of any of it, really.
Do you mean like something like maybe involving drugs, or what do you think?
No, tobacco.
Tobacco. Mm-hmm. Oh, that's mentioned in the documentary too.
That's right.
That he was
correct.
he was moving possibly.
I mean,
is what they're trying to say.
It's the best reason I can think of for why the IRS maybe came after him is the possibility of a secret business there that they just couldn't get a hold of it if it really was going on. There's always that possibility. My mother never knew anything about it, or she dummied up when I asked her about it. We would never know anything like that because there's no statute of limitations on smuggling. So
Yeah.
so I don't know. He might have been a bad boy that got close to the sun. That was like the phoenix got close to the sun. I don't know that for sure. That's a mystery. That's an unsolved mystery. Nobody knew where McAllen was in 1947, 48. McAllen was not on the map. I mean, when Life magazine came out and it said McAllen, Texas, I mean, that's it. It put McAllen on the map. Then 3 weeks later, Universal Newsreels, it came out and it talked about in McAllen, Texas. Before that, people didn't know who he was. This is a community of farmers and citrus growers. Okay, a couple canning plants. There's nothing huge and industrious or something like bubblegum going on there. There's certainly not. I know the town didn't know who he was. It was this guy, City Slicker from Detroit, walking around in these fancy pinstripe suits with his hair slicked back with an entourage of people. And then that magazine hit, and it was like, oh, this is who this guy is. Oh, my God. And so McAllen, that they had a superstar all of a sudden, and they had a place on the map.
It's kind of like Brownsville when Elon came down there, and they were taking pictures of him all over the place. I mean, it's equivalent in the sense of one of that's the richest man on earth, and one of the richest men on earth at the time. And your dad was one of the richest Americans. I mean, at the time, I'm sure probably on the planet Earth as well.
Yes, he was. He had such a meteoric rise. So it happened so quickly.
Were there any stories that were excluded from the documentary that you wanted added or just made the cutting room floor?
Well, when you make a film, you got to make sure that it doesn't drag and whatever. So I always say it's kind of like you're killing off your little babies here and there. That these little chunks of information that are good, but if you start straying too far away from Andy, who's is the main source of importance and focus, then you get off track. We at one time we kind of delved into a little bit of what he did after Bubblegum King, other than the Mamco vending business, which was kind of got into politics a little bit in the 90s. And he campaigned for Ann Richards and had a campaign office in McAllen, and I guess he was a super delegate for Michael Dukakis when he ran against Bush 1. That we had a little bit of that, just a little, I guess some of his civic involvements. I know that he was involved in the free trade center, getting that going.
That's what I was gonna say. Like, McAllen has its own like foreign trade zone over there.
Yeah, he was real big. He was real big on helping get that going. I've got
because
a
your dad
document.
invented it. Your dad was doing it before it even existed.
You bet. He was, sure. You think they didn't talk to him? They did.
Wow.
I've got a document that says he was very instrumental in helping develop that.
Wow.
I got one signed by Othel Brand, who wasn't his best buddy, but
And for some of the listeners, I know who Othel Brand is, but who was Othel Brand at the time?
Mayor McAllen.
He was for a long time, right? For many, many years.
Yeah, for a long time, yes.
And him and your dad did not see eye to eye.
No, they were polar opposites.
And for our listeners, Mayor Othel Brand was very controversial with some of his racial statements.
He was, which my dad, of course, did not like because, to him, Latinos are king down here or else.
And
And the other aspect to your dad's story, which I found like incredible from the documentary, was like perseverance. Like, your dad fell, but yet he continued on. I mean, he got married. He had to.
Who has that today? Who would? I think about that, and it's like, and other people who have been close to this documentary have said the same thing. How did he just keep getting up? How did he keep getting up? And I was like, well, that's what he saw. It's came from those parents. Those immigrant parents were tough. Immigrants are tough. They are. The immigrants here in the valley are tough too, man. They're tough.
But would your dad like wake up like with a smile like every day? Because I mean, your average person, if they were like, I was successful, the IRS came in, ruined me, they would be depressed, not want to get out of bed, be like, I'm done with life.
There's no time to be depressed. This is what we discussed. I discussed this with my mom because she was very close to him when that happened, when it first happened, but it didn't last long because she said he didn't have the time. He didn't have the time to be depressed. And she said, but he saw his parents go through this. There's no time to do that. If the time elapses, then you're going to be in the gutter. And he realized that there was no time to do that. So he got up and started doing that vending business. But when the peso devaluation happened in '84, goodbye vending business. Again.
Oh, wow.
Again, he lost it. He lost almost everything.
And that wasn't in the documentary.
Second time. That's not in the documentary. There's something that's not in the documentary. That's right. He had that business for 30 years. The peso devaluation happened. You remember, I don't know if you know this, but people were destroyed overnight.
It was overnight, yeah.
He's one of them.
Wow.
That's right. I remember when they called me and told me we had to fire Chapter 11, and I was like, why? Nobody's coming across to. None of the Mexicans are coming across and staying in the hotels and spending any money anywhere. Nobody's putting any money in the vending machines. It's like, I was like, oh my God. So I know. And then after that, though, that's what he got into the political thing, and then he became he became an advisor, okay? A financial advisor and an entrepreneur.
That is so cool.
And started, people started paying him for advice and then doing the political stuff.
Oh my!
That was his third life. He had a third act lot of people don't have a third act.
A lot of people don't even have a first.
He had a third act, and in the end, he worked for Coke. It was always his biggest competitor, but they paid him a lot because he was the guy who could get the accounts. He was an account guy, you know, for the vending business. He was the account guy. He was the manager, the owner, and he was also the account guy because he was the face of that place. So that's why he got so many accounts, because everybody liked him. You know, he sold them on the idea of it.
It's like you said, your dad, you know, of course, is Spanish, but he had that X factor, that charisma,
The charisma.
to connect with people.
Your dad has just an amazing story, and what's more amazing is how the principles that people can learn from your dad, from watching his story, from watching the documentary, understanding what drives great people to do great things, and even though they face failure, they still dust themselves off, get right back up, and just keep going.
Yeah, he did that, and that came again from the immigrant struggle he saw his parents go through. They didn't have time to wallow in it, you know, today sometimes people have a little time, and I guess that he just wanted to get going again and put his mind to something. What it should teach you is immerse yourself in something else as soon as you can, you know, as soon as you can. Dust yourself off and get going again, get back on the horse. That's what he did. And even so, I mean, the IRS were coming at him for years. The last IRS payment was in 1971. 1956 is when the deal was made. It's 15 years. He was in a different lifetime. It's really sad to see this paperwork from 1971 and see that this is the last payment.
Mr. Paris, Ef'n, listeners, thank you for listening. Watch the documentary. It's on Amazon Prime. And I guess we'll go from there. Thank you.
Shoot some bubblegum.